Again, we will be recording the session. So welcome everyone. Let's share my screen one more time. Good afternoon. My name is David Chudnow. On behalf of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh, I would like to welcome you to this commemorative Torah study session. Today we honor the lives lost and the people affected by the attack on the three congregations, Dor Chadash, New Light, and Tree of Life or La Simcha on October 27, 2018, which corresponds to the Hebrew day, the 18th of Cheshvan, 5779. Our Torah study today is dedicated in memory of the 11 people who perished on this day 2 years ago. Please rise if you're able as we recite their names. Joyce Feinberg, Edith Balcha Bat Abba. Edith Balcha Bat Abba Menachem Behenka. Richard Gottfried, Yosef Ben Chaim, Rose Mallinger, Razel Bat Abraham, Jerry Rabinowitz, Yehuda Ben Yechezkel Veselma, Cecil Rosenthal, Cecil Chaim Ben Eliezer, David Rosenthal, David Ben Eliezer, Bernice Simon, Bela Rachel Bat Moshe, Sylvan Simon, Zalman Shachna Ben Menachem Mendel, Daniel Stein, Daniel Abraham Ben Baruch, Melvin Wax, Moshe Gadol Ben Yosef, Irving Younger, Yitzhak Chaim Ben Menachem. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing. You may be seated. I'm now going to invite Jeff Finkelstein, President and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh, to introduce our scholar, Dr. Julie Rubin Schwartz.
Thank you, David. Dr. Shuli Rubin Schwartz is Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, the first woman selected for that position in the seminary's 134-year history. In over 3 decades, Dr. Schwartz has held numerous leadership roles at JTS, most recently as provost. From 1993 to 2018, she was the dean of the Albert A. List College of Jewish Studies, JTS's undergraduate dual degree program with Columbia University and Barnard College, and my alma mater, although she was there not while I was there, but while both my brother and sister were students there. In 2010, Dr. Schwartz also became dean of the Gershon Kex Graduate School, a post she retained while she was provost. Dr. Schwartz, who earned her PhD at JTS, became one of the first women on its faculty and was instrumental in the addition of Jewish gender studies to the curriculum. As a scholar of American Jewish history, she brought to light the previously overlooked contributions of women to the development of American Judaism and expanded our understanding of modern American Jewish society and culture. I'll add one other personal note, which is that her sister is a dear friend and close colleague who worked at the UJ Federation of New York, and her sister's the one who told me, as someone who grew up in Boston, that her middle name Rubin is the Rubin's Deli that used to be in Brookline, Massachusetts. So with that, Dr. Schwartz, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. And good to see you again in this way, and some other familiar faces on the Zoom. So, and thank you for inviting me. I feel honored to be able to honor the memory of the 11 individuals who were murdered. And so this is, of course, I teach this in their memory, and may their memories be blessed. So as we remember them today, and of course the horrific murders that occurred in Pittsburgh at this time, I thought that we would take some time together today to think about this concept of memory, of how we remember as Jews, what we remember, what should we remember, why, and just kind of to begin by saying that contemporary individuals, and I'll focus right now on our own country, contemporary America, we suffer from a dangerous lack of historical memory. We think of all of families who skip or delay their children's vaccines because they don't remember life with measles and how deadly measles could be. They don't remember smallpox and polio. And as a society, we've learned the hard way through this pandemic that we as a society have had amnesia about the 1918-1919 flu that took the lives of 50 million people worldwide. We see what's happened in this election cycle, such anxiety about our democracy. But I can tell you as a historian, we've had ugly contested elections like this at other turning points in our history. I'm thinking especially of the election of 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected. He only got 39.8% of the popular vote, and his presidency was in doubt. People were also worried about being overrun by private armies, and there was a lot of concern for the future of our democracy. So I'm going to quote from a really fascinating study that I consulted as I was preparing for this. It's a book about the rebellion in Ulster, so not immediately relevant, but Guy Biner, in his book entitled Forgetful Remembrance, Social Forgetting and the Vernacular History of Rebellion in Ulster, I thought he has a good framework that can help us think today together about memory. He wrote, "It is wrong to think of forgetting as a malfunction of memory. If anything, remembrance is the abnormal exception, which is only made possible thanks to the pervasiveness of forgetting. The vast majority of human experiences are irredeemably forgotten. So we must deliberately choose to remember. Now, it's a human and societal curse, but also its blessing and its challenge. We couldn't survive if we remembered everything. But we as individuals and collectively forget certain things at our peril. Deliberate remembering is what we do on a family level when we create photo albums to shape and preserve family memories for the next generations. When we name children after deceased relatives and share the stories of departed loved ones with their namesakes. We know that Judaism understands the importance of deliberate remembering, and our tradition evolved precisely around the deliberate construction of memory as a way of forging our identity as a people. So I thought that we would, the text that I'd like us to look at and that I hope you have all gotten copies of, yes? I hope that's correct. It's at the end of the morning service, at the end of the Shacharit service, in the Ashkenazi prayer book. It includes things like the 10 Commandments, like Maimonides.
How do you get the text?
Yeah, sorry, Dr. Schwartz, could you, do you have the link that we could pop in the chat? I don't have it.
Did I not? I thought Chava sent it to you yesterday. Okay, let me find it.
Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, she sent it out definitely yesterday.
But it didn't get sent at least to all the participants.
Yeah,
And
I'm
those
gonna put it in the chat. Hold on, I'm looking for it.
Do you have it?
I do not seem to have it.
So I'm gonna eat. Okay, sorry.
Apologize.
So I will email it to you.
Okay, and then I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, your email? Sorry, I have it.
Yep.
Okay. I just sent it to you.
Okay.
Okay, so while he's sharing that, I'm just gonna contextualize it. It's at the end of the morning service of Shacharit. It's something I did not notice myself. And you will find the 10 Commandments there. You will find Maimonides' 13 principles, and you will also find these, what we will call 6 remembrances. 6 things that we ought to be remembering every day.
I'm copying, posting the link right now. All right, if everyone can click on the link in the chat, you can, you'll be able to see the document.
Okay, everyone got it now? Good, okay. Great, so let's have a look at these 6 remembrances. You'll see they're all quotes from the Chumash, from the Torah. Most of them are from the book of Deuteronomy, and many of them will be familiar to you. The first, Leman tizkor et yom tzidcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yimei chayecha. Remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt as long as you live. We know that remembering the Exodus from Egypt is something that is so much a part of not only of our liturgy, of something that we recall every day in our prayers. It obviously is the basis for the Passover celebration, particularly for the Passover Seder, where we are told not only to remember the day of our departure, but to remember as if we were there, as if we were reenacting that departure every year during our Seder. So clearly a central remembrance for us as Jews. Second one is from the book of Deuteronomy also. Rak hishamer lecha ushmor nafshecha ma'od, pen tishkach, lest you forget, et hadvarim asher ra'u einecha ufen yasuru milavecha kol yimei chayecha. It goes on, you can continue reading. We'll look at it in the English as well. Take utmost care and watch yourself scrupulously so that you do not forget the things that you saw with your own eyes, and so that they do not fade from your mind as long as you live, and make them known to your children and to your children's children, the day you stood before Adonai, our God, at Chorev, when Adonai said to me, gather the people to me, that I may let them hear my words, in order that they may learn to revere me as long as they live on earth, and may so teach their children. So again, part of this pattern of remembrance, redemption from Egypt, revelation at Sinai, right? God at Chorev, another word for Mount Sinai, when the Jewish people received the Torah. 2 critical things to remember. The third, we're remembering not the high points of our communal history, but here we're remembering a more challenging moment in our history as Jews, and this is the story of Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt, how undeterred by the fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when Adonai, your God, grants you safety from all your enemies around you in the land that Adonai, your God, is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. And as I'm sure many of you know, Amalek became a stand-in for all the enemies of the people Israel over time, and became kind of that emblem of never forget, right? For Jews to never forget. This is all of the ways in which enemies have tried to destroy the Jewish people, destroy Judaism, and that kind of double messaging, right? Remember, don't forget, which we can, if we have time, we can talk a little bit about that. Why both? The fourth is another Zachor al Tishkach, remember, never forget. And this is how you provoked Adonai, your God, to anger in the wilderness. So this is how did the Jewish people provoke God to anger in the wilderness? This would be the story of the golden calf, right? When the Jewish people lost faith because Moses was absent for too long, getting the Torah, and that's when they built the golden calf. And so again, remembering God's wrath as a result of the golden calf. Number 5, this was fascinating for me to read. Zachor et asher asa Adonai Elohecha leMiriam baderech b'tzeitchem miMitzrayim. Remember what Adonai did to Miriam on the journey after you left Egypt. So this is referring to the punishment that Miriam suffered because she spoke unkindly about her sister-in-law, Moshe Rabbeinu's wife, and she suffered from skin disease and had to be removed from the camp. Now we understand she was quarantined. Now we know all about that. This then is another way in which another failing here on the part of the Jewish people that God wants us to remember. And then finally, something I think most of us are familiar with, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho, remember the Shabbat and keep it holy. So now I have the opportunity, hopefully, to hear from you. What do you make of these 6 remembrances? Why? Why these 6? Why not others? And yeah, let's just start with that question. Why these 6? You can raise your hand. You can put that raise hand signal, or you can unmute yourself and speak.
We do have a comment in the chat. Do you want to, you see it says, why remember Shabbos but not safeguard Shabbos?
I'm not sure what the question is.
That why wouldn't it be both versions? To
Well, I think
remember and to safeguard the Shmos and the Dvarim, both, because that's we learn so much from having both and that difference. And this is only the schmos one. I don't know. I mean, I don't have an answer. That's why I said for others.
Mhm.
It just, that's what I started thinking about.
Yeah, I think you're right that in a way that each of these incidents is evocative of so much more. I think the simple answer is this. This is particularly focusing on 6 times in the Torah where the word Zachor is used. And we have the benefit of whenever we read Zachor at Yom HaShabbat L'Kodsho, we have in the back of our minds Shamor at Yom HaShabbat. Right? So we kind of get the benefit of the dual message while they only need to quote one verse here.
It seems to me that there's a great Jewish tradition that begins in the Torah of this sort of concern for things that we might forget, right? And sort of essential principles. And of course, Shabbat would be among them, but also, you know, the Amalek thing is threads through the Torah. The Pesach story, remember that you came from slavery, that we want to make sure that there's no possible way that our great grandchildren will not know this story. And it seems to me that some of these things sort of fit into that category of like this is a really important one. You got to make sure you teach this one to your children and your grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If I can chime in, I looked at the list and 4 of them were things that you would normally expect to see: Exodus, Torah, Amalek, and Shabbat. So those were not surprises to me. 2 of them were not ones I normally like think about that we're supposed to remember all the time, the golden calf and Miriam. And so it gets me thinking like, okay, what was in those stories and why are we supposed to remember them? And also like, why were the rabbis of that time preoccupied with those particular stories, and would that carry forward? I think particularly about the golden calf, I think we're less concerned about the possibility of idolatry than maybe people were in an earlier era. But I keep coming back to that Miriam story and trying to think like, what are the values in that, and what is like the behavioral admonitions that we're supposed to take from remembering that particular story? Because I never considered that was a story I was supposed to really be thinking more about.
Yes. Thank you, Tammy. I had similar reaction. David.
I think that not necessarily to answer Tammy's question, but I had similar thoughts where I started thinking like, okay, what's the difference? What's the similarities between all these things? And I feel like what it does is similar to other things within our davening, where it's taking one idea, right? So this is memory, and it's taking this holistic approach to it, right? So each of these has a different interaction with God or society or whatever. So the first one is, we're remembering the action of walking out of Egypt, right? So in our actions, we should remember. And in the second one, we're remembering the seeing of, and I think it's seeing and hearing really. And the next one is that we're remembering physical pain that was like an outside group brought to us. And then after that is not physical pain, but we're remembering the emotional pain that we put on God by making him angry. And then Miriam is just, it's our speech. We should remember to, guard our actions of speech. So it's hearing and walking and feeling, so it's all it's sort of all the senses. And then Shabbat is sort of the spiritual sense, and that's sort of the only. So I feel like it's trying to holistically say remember your history through through touch, through speech, through listening, through emotion. I guess they're describing senses differently than we describe senses, but it's you see what it's you. Does that sort of?
That's lovely. That's lovely. I don't think we
Could
got
I-
taste in there, but That's
You
great.
don't have taste in it. That was the one thing. It like left out taste and smell. So that's why I'm
Yep.
thinking it seems like the Torah or the rabbis thought of senses differently than we.
Maybe. Yeah, that's great.
The
Thanks.
Miriam one is very, Judy Bardak, the Miriam one is very striking because Lashon Hara, because I love to gossip. And every year at Yom Kippur, I'm beating my breast when we come to that one, you know, and I'm saying, how long is it going to be last before I start gossiping again? But of course, what she did was worse. So that was one thing. And the young lady who said idolatry isn't a problem today, I beg to differ. I think the worship of the dollar, the worship of things, the worship of material things, the culture of shopping. Again, I love to shop, but I think that I consider a lot of that idolatry. That not all of us are afflicted with it. Not all of us think that we are judged by how many assets we have of the material nature. But nevertheless, I think idolatry is alive and well and living in 2020 in the United States.
Great, thank you. And you're also helping us. You know, David, you helped us expand it in a sensory way, the way we think about these 6 remembrances. And Judy, you helped us think about it metaphorically. You know, how what do they signify? Not in specific, but in a broader way. Great. Other comments? Rabbi?
Yes, I wanted to just reflect on how the last one is God selecting something for us to remember. The first 5 is Moshe Rabbeinu as a teacher, self-selecting what he wants the new generation to remember. So it's interesting. These are his personal choices of what he felt we need to remember. And it's just a fascinating view of him reflecting on 40 years roughly and saying, these are what I need you to remember as you're about to enter. So it's interesting the choices that he's made of what he felt you need to remember, each hitting upon a unique, specific theme.
Great. And also then I think what you're also saying is it also then is fascinating why these 6 were chosen here, right? That 5 of them are from the book of Deuteronomy, where, as you're reminding us, this is Moshe Rabbeinu reflecting and at the point of his life where he wants to make sure that people remember certain things. So he's emphasizing them. And then the 6th is from Exodus. And this is, you know, obviously from the 10 Commandments from God. Thank you. Amy.
When I looked at the different ones, it seemed to me, I saw it from a different point of view. Remember the day of your departure is remember that feeling of going from slavery to freedom, because it isn't until the day of departure that they become free. And that's a moment that freedom is considered something that we hold very dear. And so it's remember that feeling of freedom. And the next one is remember the things that God gave us, which is the words and the wisdom. And then the third one is remember how God protected you from the attackers. And the next is remember how God forgave you when you angered him. And remember that there is, you have to behave in a certain way to each other. And the last is, and remember this wonderful gift that God gives you. And to me, it's remember these different things that have been given you because they're things to cherish. And so I guess I saw it in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you. Other comments?
If no one else is, the person who just commented, sorry, I missed the name. But
Amy,
when she,
hi.
thank you. When you said leaving the people were free, it reminded me of then, well, they were and they weren't, because their experiences had shaped them so much that they weren't the generation who could really be autonomous. I mean, it just made me think about the difference between the individual and the communal, acting as individual, acting as communal, and the character of that, which is part, which then, I mean, what the chancellor said before about my previous comment about how layered it all is, when I was saying, well, yeah, but why didn't it add the Shamor one to the Zahor one? It's the same thing about, it's almost like a palimpsest where, because Jewish culture is so focused on remembering, it's like saying things in code. It's like the prisoners with the joke where they only say the number and everybody laughs, or someone says you didn't say that wrong, you said that wrong. It's, these really aren't 6. These are 6 raised as exponentially, because to a shul goer who keeps coming and hears the unfolding of the narrative in cycles each year, it's going to go all sorts of places.
Great. That's beautiful. Thank you again. So I guess just a little, another way to think about this is also to, 3 of these are so very much part of the cycle of the year, of the liturgy, right? Creation, revelation, redemption, right? We see that every day in our tefillah. And so here you have a little slightly different order. You start with redemption, revelation, right? The first and the second are redemption, going to Sinai to Revelation. You end with creation, right? With Shabbat as the pinnacle of creation. And then, the other 3 are different category of remembering. One way of thinking about the golden calf incident and the Miriam incident is, we could say that one of the things we need to remember are the ways in which we fall short in our relationship with God, Ben Adam Lamakom, right? And that the second with Miriam is how we fall short in our relations with other people, right? The Lashon Hara piece that was mentioned, right? Speaking ill of others as just one among many of our shortcomings as human beings, but as I can't remember which of you referenced the High Holiday liturgy, Judy, I think. It is, so we know that so many of those al-hates are about the ways in which our speech can be hurtful to others. And so this is one biblical stand-in for that. And then the final one about Amalek is really, look, we know that Amalek stands in for every anti-Semite that seeks to destroy the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. And so that is, we can't really, I think that part of what is being messaged here is that we can't be we can't either focus only on the good parts of remembering. We need remembrance to also be, to protect us, because we have to not be naive about a lot of the challenges out there in the world. And we also can't be only insular, right, in focusing on our shortcomings, our individual shortcomings, or our shortcomings as a people, be they against in our shortcomings vis-a-vis our relationship with God or our relationship with other human beings. So I'm just going to pause if there are any other comments. Okay, so I just want to add just one or two other things to this. The Sifrei on Devarim, one of the commentaries on Devarim, helps me understand, or it gives me a lovely insight as a way of thinking about this dual messaging of Zachor and Al Tishkach, right? To the positive, we have to remember, we can't forget, right? And so the Sifrei writes that the word remember is telling us that that's bapeh, with your mouth. You remember with your mouth. You don't forget. That's what happens balev, in your heart. So we never want to forget in our hearts the traumatic incidents of our lives, pain, death. But if we want to be sure that others remember, we have to speak about these things in our lives, the good things, but the painful things as well. So, you know, of course, we're thinking about the reason why we are here studying together. We need to publicly acknowledge what happened. And we know as a people, we have many ways to do that, many ways to not forget, many ways to remember by broadcasting that remembrance. We give tzedakah, we study together, we have memorial services, we set up scholarships, we dedicate lectures, buildings. These are a lot of the ways that I think we not only don't forget in our hearts, but we actually broadcast our remembering so that it will outlive what's in our hearts. Because that's not enough. We want this remembrance to extend beyond us. It's something I think about all the time. It so happens that this yurtzeit coincides with the yurtzeit of my late son, which is Saturday night and Sunday. It's something that for all of us who've lost loved ones, we need to think about. How do you keep alive the memories of cherished individuals who've died to generations who never knew them? You know, my late son, there are now grandchildren, thank God, named for him. I want him to be alive in their lives. And of course, they, by definition, will never know him. And these are some of the ways that we do this. We do this with photos, we do this with stories, we do this, I did this with a scholarship fund that I set up in his memory. And these are some of the ways that we seek to provide, to ensure that the memories extend beyond us to generations who won't experience what we've experienced. Both in the positive, the memories of the 11 individuals that you knew well, that I only know because of the way that you will keep their memories alive, but also of the tragic circumstances under which they died. And that too is something that we need to make sure that is also messaged, not only in our hearts and in the hearts of the community, in your community, but much more broadly, because these are lessons that all of us need to learn. So I just want to read one more text, which similarly messages this idea, and it's really on the, it's from the Ramban, Nachmanides, and he's writing about the verse about Amalek, so also the Zachor and Al Tishkach, and so he's picking up on what the Sifrei said, that the Sifrei says, remember by mouth, don't forget by heart, and he says, that it is, he says, I'm not sure I understand what remembrance is through the mouth. And he feels that doesn't feel adequate to him, but he says, but we must not forget what Amalek did, and until we obliterate his name from under the heavens, and that we are to tell our children and our descendants, saying to them, thus did the wicked one do to us, and therefore we have been commanded to obliterate his name. You know, there's a little contradiction in that whole messaging about Amalek, because if we have to obliterate Amalek, then how are we supposed to remember and not forget Amalek? So Ramban is trying to work his way out of that conundrum. And he, like our tradition in many other places, is telling us that you do this, you remember and you don't forget, because we teach this to our children and their children. And we know that this is what we Jews do, right? It's in the Shema, V'shinantim levanecha, right? That built into what we do is the educational component and the kind of chain of generation component, right? Of going from one generation to another. So in many ways, the main vehicle of remembrance is telling stories. And I think one of the messages of choosing these 6 unique remembrances is to make it clear that we need to remember, you know, not only the happy stories, but the tragic ones as well. Sometimes stories that, you know, we know that sometimes you don't really want to relive painful episodes in your life. You'd rather not talk about them. We know for how many decades sometimes certain Holocaust survivors could not speak about the horrors that they had experienced. And many of them came to a point at a certain point in their lives where they felt they had to do it, because otherwise it's balev, otherwise it's just in your heart. And then when you die, it dies with you. And so this messaging of teaching the next generation is I think crucial. It's crucial to our sense of ourselves as Jews, and it's particularly crucial, you know, as we're thinking about this today. So I think as I, you know, go back to what I started with, you know, we live in a society where amnesia is, you know, things that are current are all the rage. And, you know, something happened 5 minutes ago. We don't really need to remember it anymore, because we just, like, you know, we have our phones now. So we don't really have to remember anything. And we live in a society where memory is just so short. and or even the value of remembering is often not only not valued, but even often disparaged. You know, new is better. What do you need to remember for? So I think my message is that there's a lot of wisdom in the way our people really depends on the story of our creation, the story of our redemption, the story of the revelation of the Torah, and that we build upon that. And what our tradition is messaging is that we have to constantly be fighting against the tendency to have amnesia. And it is incumbent upon each of us to do that and to remember, and even as memory naturally fades, to consciously remember, to consciously not forget, and to make sure that we don't only do that within ourselves, but out there in the world, not only to our community, but beyond. And I guess I would just say, by doing that, that is truly how we will honor the memories of the 11 individuals who were murdered just 2 years ago. Yehi Zichram Baruch.
Thank you, Dr. Bird. That was phenomenal. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for this session, and thank you for your teaching. And also thank you to all the participants who participated. In just a moment, we're going to close with Kaddish D'Rabbanan. I included a link to the text in the chat. We're not going to put it on the screen. It's the tradition of the three congregations that 10 faces on the screen constitute a minyan, so we're going to leave faces on the screen. So if it is your tradition, please rise, and I invite Rabbi South Adelson of Congregation Beth Shalom to recite Kaddish D'Rabbanan.
I say Yishar Kochech to Dr. Schwartz for sharing words of Torah with us today. Very powerful message. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah ve'alema divra chiruteh ve'amlich malchuteh v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam v'l'alamei alamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shemei d'kudsha b'richu le'ella min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alama v'imru Amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Talmidei Hon ve'al kol Talmidei Hon ve'al kol man de'asakin be'oraita di ve'atra haden v'di v'chol atar v'atar yehe lehon ulchon shel amar Rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin u'mzonar v'cha ufurkana min kodam mabahon divishmaya v'imru Amen. Yehe shel amar Rabba min shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'romav hu berachamav yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
All right, that concludes the formal session. I see that Beth Kislev asked if we could ask some questions. If Dr. Schwartz wants to stay on for a little longer, there can, I mean, if there's some
Sure.
questions.
I have till 2.
Yeah, at 2 o'clock I will close this session, but that book ended the formal learning. So thank you all for joining, and yes, thank you all for participating as well.